Hey, you. Welcome to Lionheart Radio. If you're new to the show, thanks for giving us a try and checking out what we have going on over here. In the last month or so, we've had a lot of athletes on the show, and today we're going to mix it up a little bit with Dr. Sean Pastuch, who is one of the co-founders of Active Life RX. Now, one of the really cool things about talking to Sean is that you can tell he takes very complex problems and he breaks them down into very simple answers. Which is cool and honestly a breath of fresh air, because in the fitness industry, it seems like a lot of people want to be guardians of the standard, especially coaches and personal trainers and things of that nature. They want you to have to rely on them. And with Lionheart Radio, we are trying to do the exact opposite of that. We want to teach you to fish. We want to give you the tools so that you can help yourself. And this is a really cool conversation that I have with Dr. Pastuch. We talk a lot about the CrossFit Games. We talk a lot about movement in general, and we talk a lot about how to diagnose imbalances that you might be having occur naturally through your programming. So once again, thanks for checking us out. And without further ado, Dr. Sean Pastuch.
At this time next year, I'm having enough to buy the whole damn thing. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good right now, but I said just wait. I'ma take it to the top of the world.
All right, welcome back to Lionheart Radio. I'm your host, Rick Alexander, founder of Lou Aviv in San Diego, California. And today I'm joined by Dr. Sean Pastuch, who is the host of the Active Life podcast. And full disclosure, we've tried to do this before, but as we've argued over who is more technically inept, I think I'm winning right now, as we've completely recorded this episode before. But thanks for being on, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure. I would say my first date with my wife wasn't that good, but we're married now. So the first time through doesn't have to be great.
That's right. Second, third time's always a charm. Hopefully we don't need a third.
Yeah.
So you just recently got back from the CrossFit Games, correct?
Yeah. So we went to, myself, my partner Jeremy, we flew out to the CrossFit Games, and then I flew straight from the CrossFit Games to Arizona to do some work with field sport athletes. So I'm back from a 2-week trip.
Okay, cool. Actually, you know what? I feel like in the spirit of dating, I'm trying to get to third base right now without starting where I need to. So why don't you give us an idea about what it is maybe that you do with athletes on a daily basis?
Sure. So our business is called Active Life, and essentially we have a CrossFit gym, we have a rehab clinic. Largely they're kind of proof of concepts, in a sense that what we do is we disseminate information for athletes and coaches and doctors online so that they can get themselves out of pain, get themselves performing better from a joint health standpoint, so that their coach, who is their primary point of contact, can turn them into the athletes that they want to be. When it comes to working with coaches and doctors, we're teaching them how to have a different kind of conversation with athletes, right? The idea of your back hurts because you did heavy cleans, so just stop doing heavy cleans, is not necessarily a responsible conversation for a doctor to be having with somebody who didn't come to them to be told something that they already know. You know, we understand that doctors above all do no harm, right? That's the oath.
Sure.
But I think that what gets ignored in that oath a little bit is emotional harm as well. So having the conversation with the athlete the right way is very different in terms of the way you're going to approach it and the way that you're going to remediate any injury.
And so as somebody that's looked at this problem and actually tried to change it, do you find that it's easier to go to the doctor and talk about the things that athletes are looking for? Or do you think it's easier, and I'm just thinking that people are listening to this from an athlete perspective, do you think it's easier to maybe look for a doctor that has the same point of reference as you?
I think that's a multifactorial response. So what I would say to that is, when you're the person going to the doctor, right, and you want to continue to squat, or you want to be able to keep running, but you just get back pain whenever you do it, or your knee hurts whenever you do it. When you go to the doctor, it's your responsibility to make sure that that doctor knows, I get back pain when I squat, or knee pain when I run, or whatever it might be, but I do not want to stop squatting or running. So can you help me do those things pain-free? Or are you just going to tell me to stop? So for me, the way that a patient needs to tell a doctor that is, hey, I'm here because my back hurts when I squat, and squatting is a very important part of my life. Can you help me get back to squatting pain-free? That's the question that I would be asking the doctor. Because now the doctor doesn't have the choice of saying, well, just stop squatting, because they don't prioritize it. And it doesn't mean that the doctor's a bad person with bad intentions when they tell people to stop doing it. Mm-hmm. Their job is to get you out of pain when you go in there and tell them I'm in pain. They can't understand how important it is to you.
Sure.
So there's that. And then ideally, you're going to see a doctor who is able to more easily empathize with you because they live a similar lifestyle.
And how are you seeing a change in perspective? So obviously with the advent of CrossFit and sports in general, like the athletic world has expanded. Are you seeing a big shift in the way that doctors are treating patients?
No, because
Not at all.
I think that when we live in the world of CrossFit and fitness as a sport, we forget that it's not the way most people work out. Right? It's not the way that it's not going to be the large volume of patients that a doctor is seeing. So the industry is not going to change as long as there's no money in changing.
Right. You mean in sports medicine because it's such a niche market compared to sick people everywhere?
Well, that and sports medicine is baseball, baseball, basketball, football, lacrosse. It's not
Okay.
CrossFit.
Fitness.
Because
Okay.
because most of the people who go into a doctor who are sports medicine oriented, they're going in not saying I need to be able to squat. They're going in saying I need to be able to play baseball. I need to be able to play football, basketball, whatever it might be. For those people, the strength and conditioning portion of what they're doing is a conduit to make them better at their sport. It isn't their sport.
Yeah, so there's always a different way to get to that same outcome, right? So without squatting, you can do leg press or whatever it is, whatever desired effect you're looking for. Okay.
Yeah, they're more comfortable finding a way around. Like, for example, in baseball, you will not see, just to begin with, you won't see a lot of power cleans. You won't see almost any snatching.
Sure.
You're gonna see them lifting a hex bar and jumping with it,
Right.
trying to create the same response. Ultimately, their goal being reducing the likelihood of injury, which is debatable as far as whether it's less likely to be injured
Okay.
and whether or not it's as effective. But they're comfortable doing that because it's what they've always done. They throw medicine balls to emulate rotational activity. They certainly do not do anything heavy in rotation through the hips. So they find another way.
Okay. So I'm actually interested then in what maybe your answer to this would be. Do you find the Olympic lifts do you find the juice to be worth the squeeze when you're trying to make an athlete better if that athlete isn't necessarily just trying to get fitter or a better CrossFitter? Does that make sense? So maybe like the tactical athlete population or your football players.
Sure. I think that it depends.
Okay.
Right. So there's a few things that it depends on. Number one, it depends on the athlete's range of motion being appropriate to be allowed to do that. I don't want to take a guy who has $1 million arm or who's going to go out and assassinate an enemy of the state, right, and risk injuring him for incremental increase in performance physically.
Okay, I would agree.
But if a guy has the requisite ranges of motion, right, and has a coach who can appropriately teach him or her the technique, and the technique is taught from the ground up so that we're not rushing to doing tricks, but we're actually learning technique, then yes, I think it's absolutely a beneficial thing to be doing.
Okay, yeah. So you're a fan of methodically going about it, right?
Yes, I'm a fan of methodically going about it, and I also believe that in the case of sport, or in the case of training for sport or for tactical athletes, I think that the full expression of Olympic lifts is overrated. Right? They don't need to be squat snatching. They don't need to be cleaning to the bottom. They don't need to be doing jerks, split jerks, in my opinion.
Okay.
Because those for me are very, very highly skilled movements to do well.
Right.
But a power clean, a hang power clean, potentially even, those two varieties of a snatch do have some benefit when done properly.
Yeah, so taking a portion of the lift and using it for a certain adaptation that you're looking for without the overall risk of the full movement.
Right. I mean, we're looking for violent hip extension.
Yeah.
That's really what we're looking for, right? And coordination through it. So the reason I say that a squat clean, for example, is not necessarily relevant for that athlete is because now you're talking about the timing of bringing your knees to your chest, staying firm at the butt. There's a lot to think about and a lot to drill and a lot of positions to work from. Where would it be worth it if you could take a guy, snap your fingers, and make him great at doing a full squat, clean, and jerk? And I know weightlifting coaches right now are like, it's just a clean and jerk.
Yeah.
Stop calling it a squat, clean, and jerk. I know that.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be great. But the question you also need to be asking is, what is the opportunity cost of spending the time drilling it?
Yeah, and I think you also got to think about the population. If you're talking about adults, they only have a finite amount of time to focus on sport, typically. So spending their time drilling motor patterns might not be the best use of your time if you can force that adaptation in a different way. And I think that's the way that a lot of people outside of CrossFit, that's probably some of the negative connotations that you see people look at CrossFit with.
Well, there's two things to that, right? Number one is if you've never done cleans before, your brain is going to mold learning how to do cleans. Mm-hmm. So there is value to learning a new movement pattern.
Sure.
It's like the idea that Cal Ripken Jr. used to tell his kids, put your gloves in this trunk, we're locking it until next season. And you're playing different sports. Because playing soccer, playing basketball, wrestling, you learn how to use your body in different positions that you wouldn't learn how to use them in baseball, and it's going to make you a better athlete. And a better athlete is a better baseball player, for example. So learning how to do a clean is valuable. But there's a degree to which there's a diminishment, diminished returns when you're spending too much time learning a skill.
Okay. And you're talking about just developing proprioception at that point. The ability to move.
Okay. Yeah, the ability to move, exactly.
Okay. So before we get too in the weeds of that, I kind of want to go back to the initial thing that you said you're working on, which is that doctor-patient relationship. Because I've seen this so much in, I guess, my time in the fitness community, in the active lifestyle. These people that get on this journey to get fitter, and then they come up against some kind of roadblock, some kind of injury, some kind of, whatever it is, problem with mobility, and then they get to their doctor, and their doctor says, okay, well, if it hurts when you snatch, you got to stop snatching. And then they're torn apart because they've been taught to trust medical professionals their entire life. So I'm curious, how are you going about changing that relationship?
So we can only do that with the people who we come in contact with. So first and foremost, the way that we do it with our patients is through education.
Okay.
Right? It's the idea that somebody walks in with a diagnosis and they feel like they've already become that diagnosis. I am a herniated disc. I am a torn shoulder labrum. I am a cam pincer malformation, whatever.
Yep, I agree.
So our ambition immediately is to tell those people, listen, that's true. And that's important that you know that. You're the 15th person this month to come in with that. And some of the people who we've seen are worse off than you, and some of them are better off than you. So the question we really need to be asking ourselves is, why are you feeling the way that you're feeling, not what is the condition that you have? Because we can get you to a place of high performance with your condition if we're the appropriate office for you.
Okay. And you're talking about from your clinic?
Yep, from the in-person standpoint, right? So
okay.
Over 80% of athletic people are going to experience some kind of a disc injury in the course of their life, and less than 50% of them are ever going to know about it, right? Because they're the ones who are going to get the MRI. Some people are going to say I had a stiff back, right? I woke up one day and I just couldn't turn my head, and after a week it was gone, but it was really weird. Those are disc injuries.
Okay.
So now what happens is those people are living with those conditions, but because they just don't know about it, they're oblivious to it because they
dealing with it.
Yeah, well, the symptoms go away. Mm-hmm. It's not until you attach a label to it. Now someone's walking around, oh, I can't do that. I have a disc injury. Well, why? You did it for a year before you knew you had a disc injury. You still had one. So why now?
Okay.
So, for example, one of the athletes we work with, I like to use him as an example, is Jared Stevens. He's a CrossFit athlete out of Missouri. And Jared went to his orthopedist, went to his chiropractor, and basically was told, you're going to be a scaled CrossFit athlete from now on because you can't go over your head. Bilateral labrum tears, bilateral rotator cuff tears. And the guy wears a braid and he couldn't wash his hair when I first met him because he was in so much pain in his shoulders.
Damn.
And it was like, well, you need stem cells, you need surgery and this and this. But surgery, if you get the surgery, you're not going to be able to lift anymore.
Right.
So I was like, well, listen, here's the deal. Let's work on this. And the worst case scenario, and he's a big, bad motherfucker. I hope I can say that.
Yeah.
But, he's one of those guys who you're like, oh, that guy probably would kill me if he had to.
Right.
He was like, yeah, the worst thing that happens is I need the surgery. I'm like, yeah, then let's just get after it. And it doesn't always happen this way, but Jared has competed at the CrossFit Games twice since we first met him. His labrum tears are still there. Mm-hmm. His rotator cuff tears are still there. The arthritis in his neck and shoulders is still there. He still has disc herniations in his neck, but he doesn't experience pain on a day-to-day. So the name of the conditions for me is relevant when it's surgical, and it's relevant when it's not because we need to know that, okay, too much volume when we can exacerbate this. But knowing where that line is, that's where we come in as clinicians instead of coaches. We program to, but not past that line.
Okay. So the value of having this podcast is every once in a while I get to ask really smart people really pointed questions. So if you hypothetically
if you want a really smart person, I should probably go get my partner.
All right. Hypothetically, if somebody's dealing with 2 torn labrums and they've foregone surgery, how did you get him back in the game?
So here's the big thing, right?
What
and
methods?
This will sound like a cop-out answer, but the truth is you figure out what he's missing and you help him get it.
Okay.
So in Jared's situation, for example, he had a little bit of a limitation in his range of motion across his shoulders. So we got in there manually and we worked on it. Right? I drove into Manhattan because he was going to be there, and we were working with each other remotely. I'm like, if I'm going to make a big impact on this guy, I got to show up and do it in person.
Okay.
So drove into the city, met him. He was working for a Noble event at the time, and worked on his shoulders manually. Made the best change that we possibly could in a very short amount of time. He flew back out a few months later, and we did it again for a much longer period of time. He's flown out subsequent times thereafter. But you don't always have to fly out, right? We also added strength where Jared was weak. So what I mean by that is his ability to farmer's carry for a big, strong guy was abysmal. I mean, he couldn't hold the weight. So what that tells us is that he's bad at farmer's carries, but what do farmer's carries do to us? They load our spine unilaterally, they load our spine axially, and they load the shoulder through distraction. He couldn't tolerate that. For him, the problem was his shoulder. It was not his spine.
Okay.
So we improved his ability to farmer's carry. We noticed that Jared couldn't do overhead pressing because it just screamed in pain, but he couldn't do high pulling, which is essentially the same range of motion for the shoulder joint. And I know for the physiology nerds out there that it's not exactly the same, but it's upward rotation in what we call abduction. So while they're not the same, they are like cousins in terms of movement. He could do high pulling. He just wasn't good at it. And it was irritating where pressing was causing screaming pain. So we built his high pull up to a place where we felt like it was acceptable and then retested pressing. And now pressing was irritable, but not screaming in pain.
Okay.
So now we started to build up his ability to press. And now he's pressing, high pulling, carrying much better. It's okay, well, what's the end range of motion that we need to strengthen? Let's see how he presses behind the neck. Can he do that well? Well, that's still screaming in pain. Okay, well, let's get upward rotation better, then go behind the neck when it's no longer screaming but irritable instead. And we just progressed him through that for months.
Yeah.
And got him back to 335 pounds overhead.
So what's interesting, what I'm hearing is one of the ways that I've seen top CrossFitters get fitter is by looking at their fitness and trying to plug holes in what they're weak at, right? Because it's an all-around game. It seems like that's kind of the way that you're going about rehab and recovery.
It is, but I also, here's the thing about that, right? And this is not to knock any CrossFitters or coaches out there. It's a different lane. I don't necessarily think that they all know what they're weak at. For example, it's, I'm not good at short workouts. Well, why not? Is it that the time domain is a problem? Or if we were doing 1 minute of burpees, would you be just as fast as everybody else? Is it because there's heavy weight involved? And if it's because there's heavy weight involved, why is it a problem for you? And people will be like, well, I'm not as strong as the other people. Sure, but why not? Is it because your left leg isn't as strong as your right? Is it because the way that you've been programming yourself in the past wasn't appropriate to build high intensity strength? To me, it's important to look past just, I'm obviously not good at short workouts. I have a very long frame. Like, okay, well, Brent Fikowski's good at short workouts. So there goes your excuse. Figure out a better answer.
Do you think it sounds like you're saying that people aren't being pointed enough in their approach?
I think that there's a lot of really, really great CrossFit coaches out there who are doing a phenomenal job for their athletes. And I think that there's a lot of less phenomenal coaches out there who are making kind of the fans' point of view changes to an athlete's physiology. You're too slow.
Like what?
You're too weak.
Okay.
Right, and it's like, we need longer workouts.
Those broad strokes that the fan would be saying. Okay.
Yeah, like, we all know that, I don't know, choose an athlete is not good at endurance events. So he's just got to do more endurance work. Well, what does endurance work look like? And what do his joints need to be able to do in order to tolerate that endurance work? And there are some really, really good coaches who know much more than I do about the energy system involvement and the contractile responsibilities of that kind of effort.
Sure.
And they're doing a great job with their athletes, and I think it's showing on game day.
Right. The Ben Bergerons of the world.
Well, the Rob D from over at Raw Strength and Conditioning is the mastermind behind Fikowski. Fikowski is too. The guys over at OPEX did a phenomenal job with Tennille Reed. And the other thing too is these athletes do it themselves.
Yeah. Sure.
So and the coaches would never take the credit. But when you get into the mind of like a Max L. Hag from Training Think Tank or Nick Fowler from Brute Strength, those guys know the physiology. They don't just know bro science exercise.
Right. Yeah, without a doubt. So we've talked a little bit about what doesn't work. You work with a lot of top performers. You've mentioned a few, and then I know you work with a few games athletes.
There were 25 this year.
Okay, so is that most?
No, I mean that includes masters and team athletes and individual.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, all right. So then, what is the right approach then? What's your approach to working with these athletes?
Well, the right approach is the approach that works for the athlete, right? So our approach changes from person to person. Like for example, let's take two people who are polar opposites, right? Working up to the games. Trying to think of someone who I know I can talk about. So working up to the games, let's look at like a James Newberry, for example.
Okay, perfect.
Right?
We're going to have him on the show. So it's perfect.
Awesome.
If you say anything crazy, he can rebut it.
Yeah, perfect. No, James is a guy who didn't perform the way that we all thought James was going to perform, including James. We all thought he was going to be great and like top 5 this year. I put him in that pick'em pool as a top 3 athlete.
I did too.
And listen, sometimes the cookie crumbles differently, right?
Yep.
But the primary ambition for us was for him to be able to go to the games and leave the games pain-free, and to train all the way up to the games pain-free. And that goal was achieved. Now it becomes a question of, okay, Rob, who's his coach, how do we go back to the drawing board and put James in a better position to be successful? And Rob knows how to do that. So he will. But so when with James, it was in the beginning, he had a lot of what he called niggles in his shoulders and his knees and his hips. They're like aches and pains in Australia.
All right.
I was like, I don't know if we can say that in the U.S. But he was like, no, it's okay. So with him, in the beginning, we were doing a lot of volume. And Rob was like, listen, whatever you need to do to make him a healthier athlete, you do, and I will take a back seat. That's his coach, who, by the way, knows a lot more than I do about performance physiology.
Okay.
So for a while there, Rob took a back seat. Not to say he didn't do anything. He was still writing 80% of James' programming, but a lot of his, foundational strength stuff we were doing. And then Rob, as it got closer to the games, I was writing him like 10 minutes of recovery or, single movement modality that we thought he needed.
Okay.
Then you look at another athlete, like, for example, his training partner, Jess Coughlin, right, who's also a raw strength athlete. We started with her much later. And because of that, there had to be kind of a, listen, do what we tell you to do, where James was more of a, how does this feel at that point? So the approach that worked with James, if we were asking Jess, how does this feel, wouldn't have worked because we didn't have the trust yet necessarily. We didn't have the common language yet necessarily. So the approach with James was soft. Mm-hmm. The approach with Jess was hard. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. How long have you? Yeah, it sounds like it's more of it's definitely an art, right? I mean, working with a human being is definitely an art. How long have you been in CrossFit? I'm wondering what it takes to have these top coaches and athletes relinquish control to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can answer that, I think. Because it's not really relinquishing control. It's actually them, in my opinion, maintaining more control. Because what's not controlled is when your athlete can't exercise for 4 to 6 weeks because their doctor told them to take time off. So by working with us, they're able to actually maintain more control over what their athlete's going to be going through, in my opinion. I got into CrossFit in the beginning of 2011. So it was, I got my level 1 the first time in May 2011. at Fort Meade in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a doctor at that time for 2 years. And I remember walking over to the Flowmaster and saying, hey, who is making sure that the best CrossFit athletes in the world are not getting hurt? Because I want it to be me. Who do I need to talk to about that? And mind you, I didn't have a fucking clue how to do that at the time.
Right.
No idea.
Right.
I thought I did. I thought I knew everything. And I still don't know everything by a long shot. But at the time, I was very ill-equipped to handle that situation. And the girl's name was EC, and she's like, there's a guy named Kelly Starrett, and we don't need you. Thank you. I mean, she didn't say it. She didn't say that. So I'm paraphrasing what I heard. And that was, for me, that was perfect. That was kind of like throwing some dry wood on a fire and telling me to try to get it.
And now you've just been buying your time and coming up through the ranks, or?
Hardly. I'm the worst person. Like if you needed someone to do surveillance on something and then report back and then come up with the best time and like a great plan to attack, I'm like the worst person in the world to do that. I see the bad guy pull up, I'm getting out of the car and going after him.
Okay, so blunt force trauma.
Yes, I did not buy my time. Okay. I was forced to buy time, but for me, that's not what was going on. I was actively pursuing at all times. So it started off in terms of how we got the trust of these coaches, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Working with people who these coaches had relationships with without necessarily knowing that we were working with people these coaches had relationships with. And then just continuing to ask people, hey, do you know anybody? Because we asked everybody, do you know anybody who you think this would value that we're not currently working with? That was a question that I asked to every single person who we did this with before anybody knew who we were. My partner Jeremy and I were doing this for about a year before we told anyone. And what I mean by told anyone is started an Instagram account and started posting about it. Right. So for a year. And really the first person to kind of latch on to us was Mike Cashew of Brute Strength. So we were treating Chrissy May Cagney, who was donuts and deadlifts and nutrition coach. Mm-hmm. At the time she was dating Drew Canavero. She got Drew to come into our office because he was in pain from grid. We helped Drew. Drew connected us to Mike Cashew. We educated him on what we do. He tried us out with this guy on his team named Brennan Fjord, who was on the Brute team that won this year. And we got him from shoulder pain to a PR snatch. And that was all Mike needed to see. Now it was okay. Here's Brooke Entz. She's next.
Nice.
And, it was cool. Yeah. Those were the first two, named athletes we were working with, but we had been doing it with dozens of people prior, knowing that, okay, this can go somewhere. And then I remember vividly talking to Dusty Highland when he was coaching Noah Olson. Noah wanted to do it, and Dusty was like, all right, well, who else have you worked with? That was the question. Yeah. It was a fair question. And when we were able to say things like Brennan Fjord, Brooke Entz, and at the time there were some other names who I don't remember who we told them, but it was like, oh, okay, yeah, that'll do.
Yeah, right.
And sure. it's kind of blossomed from there. The athletes are now in large part coming to us, and then the conversation becomes with the coach where it's a disarming of them, where it's, hey, listen, we have no ambition of replacing you at all. Yeah. We do not want to write muscle ups in somebody's program.
Right. Okay. So when you say doing this, right, and I use air quotes there for people that can't see, but when you say doing this for a year or whatever, are you talking about a proprietary system that you and your partner utilize? What are you talking about when you say, are you talking about the approach you're using to these athletes?
Yeah. So people have talked to us a bunch of times about, trademarking the system and all, and it's just good exercise. And it's really, that's all it really is what's happening is we're taking a step back or to the side, however you want to look at it, where the performance coach, and that's where I see like the training think tank guys, the Brute Strength guys, those are performance coaches, right? It's their job to make sure that you can perform the most efficiently that you possibly can on game day. Mm-hmm. That's their job. Part of that job is making sure that you can perform all the way through. Our job is just to say, this might be a problem for you on that path. Now, it's not something your coach is necessarily looking at because it's a micro issue and they're looking at the macro because that's the only way that they can be successful. It's not their job to look for subacute pathology. They would be burdened with the minutia of it.
Right.
So when that's all that we look at, we have the advantage of saying, yeah, great, your creatine phosphate system's not good, but you're really bad at upwardly rotating your shoulder under load. So we're just going to handle that.
And are you going to handle that by working with them on movement pattern, or by programming exercise that inherently change that movement pattern?
Both. So we look at the program that they're currently doing, and we look to see, is there anything that they're doing that is going to compound this problem? Right? Are they doing so many pull-ups that their inability to upwardly rotate their shoulder is compounded by their capacity to downwardly rotate their shoulder? If it is, we talk to the coach and say, hey, we'd really, really, really like to see less downward pulling for this athlete, like none of it, while we work on the ability to upwardly rotate. And oftentimes we get wait a minute, the open is a month and a half from now. You want us to stop doing pull-ups? That's what she's the weakest in. And we say, yes, because she's actually not the weakest in pull-ups. She's the weakest in shoulder health. And if we create healthier shoulders, she'll get better at pull-ups without even doing them.
Right.
And that happens over and over and over again.
Yeah, so that's interesting. And that's actually why I was asking the question, because when you have these CrossFit athletes, typically they're not pro athletes. A lot of the times they're just people that are trying to make it, right? That are all in on the dream. That takes a lot of time out of their day to be good at multiple disciplines. So when you're talking about programming just for movement patterns, just for rehab, it's like, you know, I start wondering, like, how much percentage of their actual training are you taking away? And when people that are listening to this that might have deficiencies in themselves, what should they be expecting to, how much of their workout should they be expecting to just be getting better? Yeah.
So here's the thing, right? I like to use the expression shift to macro.
Okay,
because we don't work predominantly with elite CrossFit athletes. There aren't enough of them to be for that to be the predominance of our business.
Right.
You know, we work with predominantly people like myself or my wife, who are like, if I do all 5 open workouts, it's because I happen to have 5 Saturdays in a row available to go to the gym.
Yeah. Well, they don't have enough money to make you the predominant ones.
But no, they don't. There's not enough money in sport in CrossFit yet. But so when I say shift the macro, what I mean by that is, why do you squat? Right? I mean, if I asked you the question, Rick, I said, why do you squat? What would your answer be?
Joint strength mostly.
Joint strength?
For me personally, because I'm a runner, yeah.
Okay. So if I asked a CrossFitter, why do you squat? It might be, because I got to get my clean up, or I got to snatch more, or I got to be able to endure volume better before my quads start lighting up.
Right.
Great. What if squatting isn't the best way for you to do that? It might be the common sense reason for you to do it, because when you catch a clean in the bottom of a squat, you can't stand it up. So obviously making your squat bigger is going to allow you to better stand that weight up. Mm-hmm. But what if the best way to get your squat bigger is to create balance in your left and right leg first, and then build bilateral leg strength?
Yeah.
Would it then be more efficient to go about it that way?
Yeah, absolutely would.
It's going to take you longer doing it our way to get the result, but the result is going to be more sustainable.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because otherwise what happens is, you build up your squat, you build up your squat, you build up your squat, you hit a new 5-rep max back squat, everyone's excited, but your back hurts. Mm-hmm. And now you got to deload a little bit. And you don't hit that 5-rep max again for another 6 months to a year. What's the value of that?
Yeah. The analogy I've been told before is it's like shooting a cannonball out of a canoe, right? If you're getting stronger and stronger without working on the foundational movement of the strength.
I like that.
So for people that are listening to this, how do they know? How do they know if they have these movement inefficiencies that should probably be corrected with pattern change?
Good question. Yeah. The answer, first and foremost, is they do. So they can start there. Yep. Start by acknowledging that you have them, right? The most common misconception for what we do is people will say, you guys prevent injury, right? Absolutely not. It is preposterous to claim that we can prevent injury. Nobody can prevent injury. And if we're working with athletes who are at the highest level in the world at what they do, someone's going to get hurt. If they're not pushing it hard enough. Mm-hmm. You know, I can tell you for absolute certainty, I lost sleep at the games because Carlene Matthews is an athlete I've been working with for a year, and she did some handstand push-ups on parallettes a few days before I got to Wisconsin. And she's a great athlete. She's done that before, but she irritated a disc in her neck. And that's what we think so far. But we got to the muscle up workout and she couldn't dip out. Damn. So we had to pull her out. I lost sleep over that for every day I was at the games. That sucks.
Yeah.
So no matter how proficient you are at reducing risk, you cannot prevent injury. What I would say, though, is that we're all dealing with some level of subacute injury that is just not being looked for, right? I mean, the person who has heart disease doesn't necessarily know until they go and get their blood work done.
Right.
We're basically doing your blood work, but for your joints.
Okay, but how can people do their own blood work, or can they not?
Yeah. Sorry, I should have answered that in a really easy way. Really easy way to do that, to start, is just test left side versus right side. Grab a weight that you can do for somewhere between 6 and 12 reps and go to failure on the left, rest in full, and then go to failure on the right. Doing the same movement. I don't care if it's a high step up, a low step up, a shoulder press, a high pull,
any kind of unilateral movement. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right?
Okay.
And see what the difference is in your ability to move left side versus right side. Because without going through all of the percentage work that we like to look for, and I can give you some of those numbers also, that's a clear as day. Oh shit, I did 12 on my left and 2 on my right. That's probably not good. Yeah, start fixing that. Right. Does it mean you're going to be symptomatic? No. But is that a problem? Yeah, for sure. The way we see it is you're wearing a blindfold and you're standing next to the cliff's edge. You're safe as long as you don't take a step to your left. Right.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But so that's one way. And another thing is some of the numbers that we like to look for, and within like a 10% of the full number deviation, is for every 100 pounds that you can deadlift, we'd like to see you squatting 80 pounds.
Okay.
So a 400-pound back squat is a 500-pound deadlift.
Okay.
Right? Your front squat should be 85% of your back squat. Your overhead squat should be 85% of your front squat. Your front rack step up on the left should be 50% of your front squat. Same thing on the right, as long as the step up is above the knee height.
For people that are in their whip right now and I don't want them to crash, is there a place that they can go on later and find this that we can link to in the show notes?
I don't think that we've actually created a place for them to find it, but that's because we didn't create the numbers. Those are all Charles Poliquin's numbers, and we just said, okay, let's borrow his data.
Okay.
And let's see how it goes. So I'm sure if they look up Charles Poliquin's strength ratios, they'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation. We used to have our assessments on the site for free, and we were like, oh, this is great. People will know that we're really interested in helping them instead of making money off of them because they're on the site for free, right? Do the assessments, it'll tell you your deviation.
Right.
Nobody used them.
Okay. You
started charging for them, and they get used all the time.
Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Perceived value.
Yeah, for sure. So whoever finds this inefficiency, are you correcting it with pure volume? Say left leg is weaker than the right. Are you just adding volume in a manner that would make sense, I guess?
It's a linear periodization of the skill. Yeah.
Okay.
But so there's more to it than just adding volume. The first thing that we're doing is we're determining, okay, is this person, let's say for example, left to right. They're better on the left than they are on the right. Now the next thing that we're looking at is, are they better at power or stamina? Okay, let's program the one of those two that they're the worst at. So let's say, for example, you can't do 50% of your 1 rep max for 20 reps with a slower down, faster up tempo. Well, it doesn't matter that your 1 rep max is off by 50 pounds. We want to make your 20 rep max well balanced first. And then we'll work our way up to the heavy loads. Because we really want to groove movement patterns under fatigue, and then we want to groove them for hard maximal efforts.
What do you see more common? Is it the right to left imbalances, or is it like the posterior chain to quad strength that you see more?
Are we talking about in CrossFitters?
Yeah, sure. For people that are listening to this, like what's the most common that you typically see?
The most common thing that we see in CrossFit, without there's zero hesitation in my mind, is that people are phenomenal at downwardly rotating their shoulders in a pull as compared to upwardly rotating their shoulders in a pull. And the reason for that is the heavy accentuation or the heavy priority put on pull-ups, muscle-ups, dips, burpees, push-ups. All of these are downward shoulder rotation movements. And the very, very low priority put on upward pulling and upward pressing, like a jerk or a clean, for example, because that part of the movement is assisted by the hips. And anyone who's doing it well is releasing themselves from the bar and actually pulling themselves under it in a weightless position rather than pulling heavy weight up to full range of motion with their shoulder. Do you follow what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So we see that people in CrossFit gyms are phenomenal at downward rotation and really, really bad as compared to that in upward rotation. And the reason for that, like I said, is the priority put on pull-ups. And then people go outside the gym and they're like, I'm so bad at pull-ups. But if you ask your friends in your office space, like, hey, I can only do 10 straight pull-ups, how many can you do? They're like, what?
Right.
None.
Right.
So you're not bad at pull-ups. You're bad at pull-ups as compared to more competitive athletes in your gym.
And are you seeing a lot of anterior rotation because of that?
So we don't even really look for that very much.
Okay.
And so we try to simplify all of it to the point that an athlete can understand it, wrap their mind around it, and own it. Because if you're like, hey, do you notice a little bit of anterior rotation of your shoulder and maybe some anterior pelvic tilt? Like, that stuff might never change, even if functionally they improve. So we don't aim to bring attention to postural abnormalities when we don't have any real track record of being able to make a change to it that's measurable. I'm not suggesting that the posture won't change. I'm suggesting that it's far from the crux of what we're trying to change.
Okay. Sure. So when I came into this interview way too hot, I started talking about the CrossFit Games. But I don't want to end it without talking about it. So I guess, after working with, 25 CrossFit Games athletes actually at the games, what were some of the big things you saw or maybe like lessons learned?
Sure. The biggest thing that we saw working with elite athletes at the CrossFit Games is that the difference between first place and 40th place has very little to do with their body and a lot to do with their mind.
Really?
Right? Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I'm not saying that Matt Fraser is not physically fitter than whoever came in last place on the men's side. He is. No doubt about it. But when you watch the way that a guy like that carries himself, it's impressive. Like Fikowski walked back in and someone went to tell him what place he was in after day one. He's like, I don't care. I'm not changing the way I work out based on where I'm placed. Where other people were like, where am I? Where am I? Where am I?
Right.
And then, we had athletes we were working with who we were meeting for the first time who, I'll tell you, before the games, before regionals, before the open, people get colds, they get the flu, they get fevers, they get body aches, all of that kind of stuff because of the stress that comes with that kind of competition.
I bet.
So there was a lot of, hey, come on over here, I'm going to treat you. And most of them now know we weren't really treating their muscles, we were more treating their mind to let them know, hey, you're not going to die, but you're not going to be comfortable this weekend. So if you don't want to pull out due to discomfort, just get used to having this and know you're not going to die and go compete. And then like you saw the light bulb go off in their head. And they've told us, like, listen, once you told me I'm good, I was good. So I think that that's probably on game day the most important thing that we can do. Because when you look at the athletes who we've been working with the longest on game day, they didn't need us to put our hands on them. Like James Newberry refused treatment over and over and over again. And it's not because he doesn't like it when I grope him.
Okay. You just didn't need it or what?
No, he felt good.
Okay.
He's like, I feel good, mate. I'm just getting my ass kicked.
Okay. Well, maybe we should have got a couple touches for good luck.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, like he's such a good athlete and he works so hard. He focuses on his recovery so much that he felt great at the games. And frankly, there's probably a line that we could have crossed during his training that would have allowed him to be a little bit more uncomfortable and focus on his recovery just as much. But there'd be stretches where we didn't have the opportunity to do it just to emulate the experience he'd be going through. But again, that's a performance thing that we're going to live and learn with.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
But he didn't need treatment. Where last year he called me from the airport in Los Angeles on my cell phone at midnight New York time because he was traveling to Australia from the games, and he's like, I need your help for next season. So we didn't have that problem this year.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's telling in itself.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, actually. That wasn't the answer I thought I would get about the psychiatric side of the CrossFit game.
That's the reason why Katrin David's daughter's won the games the last 2 years leading up to this year is because mentally she's better than everybody else. I mean, she's from the little bit that I know about her, just watching the way she walks around, she doesn't feel like it doesn't look like she feels like it's everyone else's to win and hers to chase. It looks like she feels like this is my room and you're welcome to hang out in it with me.
Right.
And that's a compliment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure.
She's not worried about what anybody else is doing. She's worried about what she needs to get done, and she's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And despite not winning this year, to me that was what came across the most clear is the mindset of these top tier athletes, how loose they were.
Yeah. That's interesting because you referenced both of Ben's athletes. I wonder. It seems like he does a lot of work on the mindset.
We've done some collaboration with him in the past, and I think that he's probably one of the best coaches out there when it comes to mindset work with his athletes. He's intentional about it.
Right.
So I don't know. I never worked with Katja. We never worked with Matt. So I don't know what he has or has not done with them, but I for sure know that that's a guy who probably first focuses on the mind and second focuses on the body.
So for people listening to this, do you think that there's a big gap right there? Do you think a sports psychologist could come in and start working with top tier athletes?
Huge.
Make a huge difference.
I reached out at the games. I actually met with Dawn, whose last name is slipping me right now, but she owns Mentality Watt. Because, there are some athletes who I can connect with and I can provide them with the confidence that they need on game day.
Mm-hmm.
But with not being with them, right, when they're training, I don't know what kind of intent they're putting into every rep. I don't know what they're thinking when they get out on the floor to compete. She fills that void. So I said, listen, I don't want to hire you. I don't have room for that right now.
Right.
But I do want to start getting work from you for the athletes who we assist. And I would love to set you up with the athletes who we work with, because I think that there's a huge component to this sports psychology, 100%. I think that's going to be the next field of specialists you're going to see come into CrossFit after you have your coaches, you have people like us who are starting to hold people together. And I think that the next thing you're going to see is the coaches who come in and work on mindset. You have nutrition, mindset is huge.
Yeah, that's interesting because even from the standpoint of not an elite athlete, it's a grueling sport. Like just having taken place in CrossFit for a few years, like it's a punishing sport that definitely rewards your ability to suffer. So it definitely makes sense that you would see that further up the ranks as well.
Huge. I mean, like I can tell you that even for myself as a competitive high school athlete, right? I was never anything special. I was never going to be the specimen people walk on the field and be like, that guy's got it.
Okay.
But like my junior year of high school baseball, I was stressing about trying to get scholarships, stressing about getting more playing time, doing everything I needed to do, and I had an average season. My senior year, I'm like, my coach doesn't really believe in me, so fuck that guy. I'm just going to go out here and do whatever I feel like doing.
Yeah.
And it was lights out.
Really? Did a lot better.
Yeah, and then he'd be like, hey, great game time. I'm like, yeah, awesome. See you later, dude.
Fuck you, dude.
Like, yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Keep telling me I'm not big enough. Like it doesn't matter. I don't really care anymore.
Right.
And I was just better.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's a good segue, I think, into the Lionheart Kicker, which is a final question we try to ask every guest. And you can do based on movement pattern, diagnosing injury, whatever you want to do. But based on everything you've done and the experiences you've had up until this point, if you could give blanket advice and it were guaranteed that everybody in the world would hear it, what would you tell people?
Work on self-awareness, right? And when I say that, what I mean is, you need to know what you're not good at, but you also need to know what you're good at. And forget about sport, because sport is not healthy in general, right? Sport is not meant to be a demonstration of health. The fittest person on earth by CrossFit standard is far from the healthiest person on earth. That's not to say that I know that Matt or Tia are not healthy people. It's not what I mean by that.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I know what you mean.
But it's a different measure.
Yeah.
But I think that for myself, at least, one of the most valuable things that I've learned is this is what you're really good at, Sean. These things. Spend most of your time focusing on becoming exceptional at those things. Learn basic tactics and everything else so that you can navigate the world, but delegate when appropriate. Somebody else would rather spend their time doing that. Like for me, I can't fathom why anybody would want to do data collection and spreadsheets and build out studies.
Right.
I can't fathom it. It's the most monotonous, mind-numbing activity in the world.
Right.
But there are people who are like data nerds. They're like, give me, manja. I want more.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, here, man. here's all my data. Tell me what I've done.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, that's like, it's a huge burden off, because it allows me not to have to feel bad about myself when it costs me a ton of energy to do something that I'm absolutely miserable at, that I don't enjoy trying to get better at, to know that there's someone out there who wants to do it with and for me, whose day I make by throwing the load of work that I absolutely hate on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
So having that self-awareness for me is huge. It's what everybody should strive for.
Yeah. And how did you strive for that? Just by gravitating towards things you liked?
No, I had to hire a coach.
Okay.
You know, it was
like a life coach, or?
You could call it that. It was more of Jeremy and I, we knew we had something. We know that we're onto something. We still haven't reached anywhere near the potential that we feel like our company can go to. But we were a little bit stagnant. We wanted to improve the way things were going. So we hired someone to come in and say, hey, let me see how you guys are doing things. And we thought day one would be like, hey, here's how you're going to track a lead. Here's how you're going to collect email addresses. Here's how you're going to market. And it was none of that. None of that at all. It was basically pointing out to Jeremy and I how different we are from each other, and how the way that we communicate with each other needs to change. And the things that we're doing in the office and on the business need to change. That each of us taking 50% of each task is a really bad idea, because Jeremy's much better than me at certain things and I'm much better than him at certain things. So our company is going to stagnate when we're each bogged down with 50% of our energy spent on something that we're not good at and not getting better at least not at a rate that's commensurate with where we want to be. So he kind of helped us figure out those characteristics about ourselves that we are really good at and really not good at, the things that we like, the things that we hate, and said, okay, buy your time back on the things that you guys hate and go kick some ass on the things you're good at.
Yeah. Man, you know, you're really good at the hard skill stuff, so I'm glad we spent the interview on that, but I really like the EIQ, esoteric stuff too. That's good. I've become so into that part.
Yeah, me too. That I've had to actually go back and start reading papers about exercise science again and about, joint mechanics, just because I spent like 6 hard months deep in EQ work because frankly, I am atrocious at natural born empathy.
Yeah.
Like I just don't, I'm like, just do the work, man.
Yep. I hear you.
I don't know what to tell you. Like it didn't happen to you. It happened because of you. If you can't recognize that, do me a favor, step aside. I have places to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, I spent like 6 hard months really, really digging deep into there, and it was valuable, but I've actually had to take a step back and say, okay, don't forget what you do for a living. Stay sharp on that too.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. So for people that are listening to this and they want to, A, either follow along with you, or B, actually participate in some of the things that you're doing and get better, how can they do that?
So I would love for everybody who's listening to either follow along or participate. I'm down for both.
Okay.
They can obviously listen to our podcast, which is the Active Life Podcast.
Yep. Oh, we'll link up to that in the show notes and everything.
Thank you. We release an interview every Monday, and then we do either a monologue or a shorter interview every Thursday. I'm actually bringing my wife on Thursdays to kind of battle with me a little bit, because she's the opposite end of that emotional structure. She gets it. She's empathetic really easily. So when I say something, she's going to be like, not everybody can do it like that.
Right. Nice.
What do you think you are?
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that. And then our Instagram account is Active Life RX. So for sure, I would love to see when this thing comes out, if however many people listen to it, then we get an uptick of that many followers on our Active Life RX Instagram account.
For sure. I hope that for you as well.
Wishful thinking, but we're hopeful for it. And then anything that we do is on our website, performancecarerx.com. And don't ask me why the 2 different names. It was a mistake we made in the beginning that we're having trouble rectifying. So performancecarerx.com is our website. Active Life RX is our social media, and our YouTube channel is The Active Life.
Okay, perfect. And we'll link it all up in the show notes. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is fun.
My pleasure, man. Anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for listening to Lionheart Radio. I hope that the information from today's show will make you fitter, happier, and healthier. For the show notes of this episode and every episode, head to www.lionheartrad.io. Yep, just like Lionheart Radio. And please, if you have the time, head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us to know that we're on the right track in delivering you reliable information and value. As always, feedback is welcomed. If you have any comments on the show or would like to suggest a guest, send me an email at rick@luavive.com. That's LUAVIVE.com. Thanks for your support, and we will see you next time.
Bitch, I feel good. Don't I look stupendous? My shine is so endless, and shit you can do to end this. Even when I'm dead, niggas still gon' bump that chip shit. Coke, white, Escalade on cinches for you dipshits. So you won't forget this. Midwest nigga be the coldest.